Happy to be here.
Hi. Okay, well, we get a lot of questions from engineers about this. If you're an engineer and you've been offered a job at a startup, there's a good chance that you'll be asked to negotiate your equity compensation. In this video, we're going to talk about how to do that, how to get the best deal for yourself. I'm Jean. I coach software engineers like you on how to negotiate their equity compensation. Most recently, I was the 19th engineer at WhatsApp, which was acquired by Facebook for $19 billion. And I worked as a hiring manager for several years. And I'm here with Lexi, who is the founder and CEO of Leopard, FYI. Lexi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So yeah, Leopard, we work with women in software engineering to vet opportunities based on the things they care about and are having a hard time getting the information for online. So things like what the compensation ranges are for a company, but also like, are there women who work there? What's the interview process like? So we help them vet companies for free. And so you can check out our site.
Today, Lexi and I want to talk about how you can negotiate equity compensation as a software engineer at a startup. We will explore questions like how to find the right salary range, what is the right walkaway number, what is your equity worth, how do you calculate it? And we'll throw in some bonuses like secret to getting the recruiter on your side, best thing to negotiate for in your compensation package. So stay tuned. But before we jump in, let's talk about equity. What is it and how does it work? So oftentimes startups will offer you equity as part of your compensation package. And this can be a great deal for both the employer and the employee because for the employer, it allows them to attract top talent without having to spend large sums of money up front. And for the employee, it gives them the potential for big returns if the company succeeds. And people often refer to this as getting ownership in the stake for the company. And this is the way you make it big as a startup employee. So let's talk about the top questions that we often get. I think the first question we always get is, should I share my comp? So I think comp means salary expectations or your current salary in the negotiation process, and what are the pros and cons here?
There are, there's all sorts of advice out there to do basically both, right? To not share your compensation until the final stages so that you can see what the company is offering. That's something that women have been kind of advised to do in our network when they join. But we actually recommend the opposite way, which is to choose a goal of what you're trying to make compensation wise and to share that with a company up front and to make sure everybody's on the same page for that.
So I think what people are often debating is like, when you start that first conversation with the recruiter, do you share the range right away, or do you sort of delay the question and the conversation a little bit? I have seen some people say like, I want at least X really upfront
Right.
as soon as they start the conversation. What do you think about that?
I like it. The only times I don't recommend it is if you're coming from a FANG company and you have a pretty high base salary in
Mhm.
addition to like a lot of, your comp in public stock. In that case, it can scare away a startup and just show them that you don't really get what you're getting into there. And so a lot of companies I've worked with in the past from Leopard and Ageless say like,
Yeah.
FANG do not need apply, especially if they come in with unrealistic salary expectations. So, in that sense, we say no. The times that I tell people definitely to say a compensation upfront is when they feel like they're underpaid in their current role and they want to fix that in the upcoming role. And so, like sometimes candidates come in and they're making 150. We take a look at the comp data that we use. We use this product Pave, which has option impact and a bunch of other really good sources in there. And we say, okay, based on your level of seniority, which we bake into like years of experience, we look at the types of roles you've worked in the past, and we say, okay, if you have 4 years experience and you've led projects on your team, you might come in as a senior, and the ranges for senior generally go from A to B, and then we pick a number that you feel good about saying to the company, and then you say it, and that is the best way to make sure that they say yes. And sometimes companies will still level you after. They'll say, I get that you want to make 180. The bands for this role are 160 to 180. Let us know if you'd like to move forward, but it's a good way to at least get that information and then decide if you're interested.
I've also seen though, like sometimes they say it up front and they go through the entire interview process. And then at the end of the day, it didn't really matter because they pick a completely different number based on how they interviewed, right?
Yeah, totally. We just had one of those today.
I think it's really hard to say because startups are such hit or miss. You never know like what kind of startup it's going to be because it could be a small startup with no recruiters or HR. It could be like a large like 500 person startup. So there's such a big range. I think if you have a pretty high number and you want to deter away startups who can't afford you, I think there might be an advantage for just saying upfront, this is how much I'm expecting. So we were talking about how to negotiate and when to share your comp. But now let's talk about using data to back up your comp. That's what you find your most leverage. So how do you research what is even the right range to ask for?
Yeah, so that comes back to this data piece. So we have a couple different ways we do it. Ideally, when somebody comes to work with us at Leopard, we talk to them about what they've worked on. So, have you been a team lead? Have you managed anyone? Have you scoped out a large portion of the project yourself, or were you kind of more following a tech lead or somebody else's instructions? And then we use that to help level in our comp database. So oftentimes it's not just years of experience. They'll say things like a senior is 4 to 10 years experience. How are you supposed to figure out where you landed in that? It doesn't make
Yeah, that's like the point that we see a lot of software engineers suffer because they think, okay, I've been working for 5 years, so I'm a senior engineer level at thing.
right.
But when I start talking to them, I realize, oh, but you haven't led any large complex
Right.
projects and you haven't had any reports. So you're actually not at that thing level. So then like they fail to comp themselves correctly. So if they were to research on their own, what are some tools that they can use?
Yeah. So I just wrote these down the other day. Let me go grab them. Like Hired's calculator was pretty good. We're putting out our own data just based on the ranges we see as well.
This is a question that comes up a lot in our Exaltitude group.
Mhm.
And I mean, for me, it's super easy because I've been a hiring manager, so I can talk to them for 10 minutes and I know exactly what band they should
Right.
be at. But if they're doing it on their own, it's a little tricky because they don't exactly know how much experience
Yeah.
their own experiences compared to the rest of the tech industry. So like I think a lot of people look at levels at FYI, but it's still not enough. It only tells you by the band, but how
Right.
do you know which bucket of band you're in?
As I mentioned, we use this product Pave. They're what a lot of companies or startups use to level employees internally and set their own bands. And there's a couple different descriptions that we are usually working off of, which is their mid-level, or they call it career versus senior. Once you're staff, or principal, I think it depends a lot per company. And so that one gets very nuanced. But for career, generally they mention that you have an experienced coding skill set, you're able to lead a couple engineers, it says 1 to 2 on small to medium scale projects with minimum guidance. That's how they define career. And so then on the senior level, they say that that's taking ambiguous problems and turning them into technical projects. They say there's like a collaborative piece, so working with product, design, and data. They said able to take on a tech lead position and like able to just basically like weigh trade-offs and lead large complex projects with technical experience to back it up. So those are kind of the differences, and we are basically going through somebody's resume and saying, does the work you've done qualify as senior, or should we stick to career in the way that we're positioning ourselves? That said, you still want to position yourself as close to a senior as you can, right? If you have anything that you've led, you should put that in your resume. You should talk about that. So it's less about like, am I career or am I senior? And how can I frame the work that I've done to be as senior as possible so that I can at least try to aim for the lower end of that senior range.
At Exaltitude, we actually spend a whole week talking about just this. Like, what are the sort of the rubric that people are using, and how do you use the right terminology to present yourself? Because you want to understand what the rest of the industry are using. What are the hiring managers and the recruiters using as the terminology, and you want to use those correct language to present yourself. And if anything, you want to try to present yourself at a slightly higher level so you can have a little bit of negotiation leverage when you're doing the negotiation for the salary. So I love that you laid out the bullet points for that. Like during class, we talk about like a big matrix. It's very complex because you have to look at all the different categories that people are looking at, like leadership, engineering, difficulty, and then all the years of experience. And you might be at different like level at the different categories, and how that creates a whole picture for the hiring manager. Okay, so like what you started your negotiation process, you did some comp research. You still want to have a walkaway number. So let's talk about that.
The way that I phrase it is that you have limited opportunities to kind of come in strong in negotiation. And so, and limited back and forths, right? If you go back and forth too many times, like it's annoying, you come off unprofessional, and it generally doesn't make the strength, especially if you go back and forth on like stuff that doesn't really matter, or not that it doesn't matter, but like if you go back and forth asking about like commuter benefits, like is that really the goal of this negotiation, or is it a nice to have? So generally speaking, we recommend listing up front all the things you'd like more information about and combining that with this kind of phrasing of, thank you guys so much for the offer. If you are able to meet the following criteria, I am ready to say yes. And the thing that people do not understand is that that is actually very useful for a recruiter, a hiring manager. They know what it takes to get the yes. Whereas if you say, I want this number, but you're not willing to say yes, there's much less motivation on the
It's
company side.
confusing. Yeah.
Right. And people do stuff that hurts their process by, throwing out a high number or throwing out a number that's not high enough. So they're like, okay, well, I want to get this done, so I'm going to say 200. And it's like, well, are you done interviewing? No. Where are you actually hoping to get outside of this? 240. So then say 240. Even if they say no and come back, you at least said what you wanted, and you kind of set the expectation that that's what you're going for in the market. And it actually makes everything more efficient for everyone.
I think what people get confused is when you say walk away number, they think it's the minimum number they need to tell them, which is a big mistake because you want to actually give them the higher range of the number. Because what happens oftentimes is people say, okay, it's a walk away number, so I'm going to give them my minimum. And then they're like, okay, done. Like recruiters like, that's a good number, I'll give it to you. And they're like, oh, maybe I should have said something higher, and they regret it instantly. And that's why they keep going back and forth. So it's actually better to give them a higher number, but make sure it's not too high. So it's like unrealistic, but as long as it's high enough in the right range, that's actually much easier for the recruiter to work with.
Totally. And recruiters get frustrated sometimes in our network with their, when somebody's being a little wishy-washy. They go, get the number. We do this all the time. I just need to know what I'm working with here. And then I can go figure out if this makes sense. And that's why we say to share your comp up front, which is that recruiters feel sometimes like they're not doing their job if they don't have your ranges or your comp goal or your walkaway number as early as possible. It's part of their job to do it well, to have your numbers. So give them stuff to go get for you is kind of how we say it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, because I think a lot of people are confused. Like you're not negotiating with the recruiter. Recruiter is like your coach. They're there to help you and guide you through the process. They're like the liaison or like the lawyer that's representing you to the employer. You're negotiating actually with the employer.
Right. The recruiter's job is to get all the information for the hiring manager. So give them the information they need to do their job.
Yeah, and I think what you said, like give them all the information up front. Sometimes people think, I don't want to sound like I'm giving them an ultimatum, so I don't want to give them a whole list. But it actually helps the recruiter because the recruiter has more information to represent you. Like imagine having a lawyer, but you're not telling them anything. So they have no data to represent you to the employer. So
Totally.
you're doing them a favor by giving them a whole list of things that you want up front.
Love that. Just a quick anecdote here. So, even as a CEO of my own company, some candidates have come to us, people who we'd really like to hire who are more experienced, who have XYZ. And they say to us, "Hey, I saw your job listing. The salary is X. I actually cost Y." And that people really worry about that. They think it's like bad, but it was actually extremely helpful for us because we said, okay, are we ready to invest in somebody with that level of seniority? And that's what it costs to invest in that level of seniority and to have that kind of person on the team. And then we assess it. They actually gave us information about what was market, right? And so sometimes, you know, companies don't have perfect information around what it costs to do business the way they want to, or they think something costs X and it actually costs Y. And by telling them that it costs Y, you're actually not only helping yourself, you're helping everybody else who's senior to make sure that companies understand what your worth is in the
Yeah.
market.
I like that a lot. I think that's a good lesson for everyone to approach negotiation, thinking, I'm not trying to milk them or I'm not trying to like get something out of them, but instead you're thinking it as a collaboration. So you're working with the recruiter and the employer to come up with an optimal number together based on research and data. We've been talking about back and forth a lot. So let's talk about how to do the back and forth wisely because you mentioned this and I've seen this a lot too. Sometimes you go back and forth too much and you lose your shot. So how do we do this wisely?
When we talk to candidates in our network, they often don't know what they're looking for in the offer process to make sure they're ready to say yes. And so that's what we talk about on the phone. There's kind of two groups of information, and the first one is more intuitive to people, even though the second one is more important. So the first group is some of the stuff I mentioned before. So, what are the health benefits? Do you guys have a work from home stipend? What are your remote policies in case I want to go take a trip to South America? Or, there's kind of that information gathering stuff. And people think that that's something to go back and forth on during the negotiation process, where it's actually not, because it's not the information that's going to determine if they take their offer or not. It's just collection mode. So that's why we say feel free to like share a list during the negotiation process of things you'd like to know, but know that that's not negotiation. That's just gathering.
Mhm.
Negotiation is usually not intuitive to people. It's the stuff we were talking about before. It's like, what does it take for me to say yes? And
Right,
that
and the reason is because it's not like you tell the company, "I want more vacation days," but that's set for the whole company by the HR team. They can't just make an exception for you. So that's not something that you can negotiate on. That's research that you need to do upfront. And if that's a deal breaker for you, you shouldn't even like don't even bother talking to the company because they can't change that. But what are the things that you can change? I love that point.
right. And what are they, right? It's not health benefits. They're not going to change the entire policy for you. Yeah, it's not days off, it's not vacation. It's sometimes they ask about like management structure or like mentorship, and I'm like, that's not going to change right now. Like, definitely don't.
But that's like the number one thing that we hear during the
Yeah,
coaching at Exaltitude. I hear I want to join a company that has mentorship and support. And I always advise them and coach them. Yeah, you need to suss that out during the interview process. It's not like you can just research, like you can't Google or Yelp this
right.
information, right? You have to find out as you're doing the interview process. And by the offer stage, it's kind of late. You should probably have a sense about the mentorship by then. And again, this is not a thing you can negotiate. You can't negotiate, I want a mentor.
Totally. What are the things that you recommend people negotiate?
um, I
Right?
mean, the best thing you can negotiate is the salary,
Yeah.
the equity. I have seen some people negotiate like remote work.
Mm.
They can sometimes make an exception for you to work remotely, but you better be really good at your interviews if you want them to make an exception for you.
I just tell people, like, get the job. As long as you can go into the office, and then remote is much easier to kind of, like, have a discussion about when you
Totally. I agree with that too. So I think a lot of the things that we just talked about, like vacation days, I mean, you can't negotiate that upfront, and oftentimes it is a company policy. But once you're in the job and you do a really great job for first 3, 6 months, and then you talk to your manager, by the way, do you think I can take a couple extra days? If you're a killer engineer, they will make that exception for you. But upfront, they don't know who you are. The company is taking a risk on you. You think you're taking a risk by joining the company, but the company is also taking a risk, and they often don't feel comfortable taking that risk without knowing you. Maybe you're a terrible engineer who just interviews well. They don't know that.
Totally. Oh, there was one more here that just came up this week, which was somebody said, in my current job, I didn't get it right away, but I have kids and I negotiated a 4-day work week where I took less pay and I worked less days. And I'd love to do that again. And it's the same thing where it was much easier for her to get that when she had proved herself as a strong person on the team who could contribute at that work schedule. But negotiating that up front is going to be really hard. And so we mutually decided, hey, we're just not going to do that. We're going to find a company that values flexibility and then ask later. And so that's kind of our strategy there.
I guess another thing you could negotiate upfront, which is often much easier, is the sign-on bonus.
Oh, yeah. How do you approach this? I'll tell you like how
Okay. So I've seen some success stories around people saying, well, I love your company, I love your product, I really want to work with you, but once I join your company, these are the things that I need to give up on. Maybe mention like other extra benefits or health insurance, or maybe you used to do a sidekick and you need to give up on that, and just list all the things that you're missing out on by taking this offer and ask them to compensate for that. And oftentimes, one time cash offering is so easy for companies to approve. You have a high probability of getting that approval.
It's really good advice. I'm always nervous when somebody wants to do that. Like we've had company, candidates, for example, whose healthcare is not going to be as good on the company's plan. So we work with candidates who are looking for fertility coverage or trans healthcare, and they're kind of leaving money on the table by not
Right.
taking a company with like Aetna versus Cigna. And so they've asked in the past, hey, this is what my healthcare would cost if I took this plan versus yours. If we can make up the difference, I'm ready to say yes. And it makes me nervous, right? Because you're going in kind of vulnerable, talking about stuff that's personal to you, but companies have said yes in the past, and it's worked.
Yeah. I love that the word you use, vulnerable. You feel very vulnerable asking for that, but I think it works really well because companies know also that you're being vulnerable and real. And I think that does work really well in negotiation when you're, being honest and upfront. And it's a collaboration. You're just being open with them, sharing all of your thought process so they understand you better. And I think that really works well.
It's a really good point. Yeah, I think that some of the ways people mess up on negotiation is they come in not vulnerable and they think they're coming across really tough or strong. And it's actually coming across like kind of irrational and the word I said before, a little unprofessional. It's whereas vulnerable, you're attempting to make it work with this company. And I think that's something people misunderstand a lot about negotiation. It should be that you're trying to work for them and you're trying to make it work, not I'm this like I don't know, right? It's very
A big
tough.
shot.
Yeah, big shot. It's not it doesn't come across nearly as well as anybody thinks it does. And it doesn't make a good impression, I find, like on the company.
Yeah. So I think to summarize, we're saying generally salary, bonuses, cash upfront is great to negotiate. Other things like benefits or PTOs, you want to sort of do your research before you go into the negotiation, because those are things that are more difficult to negotiate, but you can often translate that into a cash amount and negotiate for that. And the general advice is that this is a collaboration, and you want to give them upfront information to help them understand you better, to make the negotiation timeline a little bit smoother and shorter. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. So a lot of people also have difficulties reading maybe not difficulties, but it's intimidating to read the actual contract and make sure they're signing the right things. What are some things that we can look out for in the contract?
It's a good question. I find most contracts to be quite standard for job negotiation, and that's just because they're using the same template for everyone, right? Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I think most of the time they are pretty standard. I get a lot of questions about how to calculate their equity, because in your contract it just gives you the number of shares you get, but they don't know how to calculate what does that mean.
It's a great question. And I think some startups, like in the past year and a half, 2 years, have been noticing that they actually give you a spreadsheet to help you calculate the value of your shares at different scenarios. And
Mm.
what's nice is you don't have to ask nice about that. You don't have to ask these silly
Oh,
questions like, what will it be at the case of an exit or $1 billion exit or a $2 billion? And so the way that some of these companies
mhm.
have presented it is, here's a competitor of ours who went public. This is what the shares would be if we went public at the same valuation, or this is
That's
if we
really
went,
helpful.
yeah,
I
that's
think Lexi, though, maybe you have a lot of experience working with startups that are really put together, because I think a lot of startups don't offer these spreadsheets, so people are trying to figure it out on their own. That's really nice. I think that would be a good sign for the startup if a company provides that spreadsheet to me. I would definitely consider joining them because I love spreadsheets, and I think that's an indicator that this company is very well put together. But oftentimes, what I just coach people, if they don't get this kind of information, which is what happens a lot with startups because it's such a hit or miss, is to just ask for the total number of shares, and oftentimes they'll share that with you. Okay, so the reason why I say you need the total number of shares is because you want the percentage. But if you have the percentage, then it's the same thing.
right.
It's just basic math. You need either the percentage or your number of shares divided by the total number of shares. So whatever number you can get, you can calculate pretty easily, right?
Yeah, and so you're totally right. When there's a number of shares on the paper, you can try asking for total outstanding, or you can try asking what the percentage is.
And that way you can also research the valuation of the company. You can oftentimes Google it, like Crunchbase or TechCrunch, whatever whatever the tools are. You can Google it and get the valuations for the company. And you can also, like Lexi said, look at competitors' valuations, and you can kind of guesstimate what the future value of the company may be.
Yeah, so we love this like valuation approach just because, especially in the tech industry in the last year or so, we've seen that sometimes the valuations are really too high, or, impact candidates' shares a lot. So we've also had a hard time finding valuations online. So if you can't find it, that's okay. That's a reasonable question to ask their recruiters. Sometimes companies don't like to put it online because they have customers that are enterprise and they don't want people to know, or there's good reasons to hide your valuation, or just not make it public. But it's usually a question you can ask the recruiters, and they will tell you that. And that's what I like about the scenario spreadsheet is they say, okay, our valuation is 200 million. If we raise a series C and our valuation goes up to 500 million, this is what we think your shares will be worth. And if we IPO, and whereas if you hear a really, really, really high number of your current valuation, that might be a flag for you. A lot of times people think that really high valuations are the right companies to join, but the math that we've given people in the past, could you see the valuation of the company that you're joining go up by 10x? And if
Mm.
so, there's likely a good likelihood that your stock would be worth 10x, and that's a good bet. So if it's
Yeah, I
200,
guess it's tricky because you have to, it depends on the economy. So, like, for example, last year, Stripe valuation was skyrocketing. They were about to go IPO, said the rumors. But then when the economy was suffering, they had to cut back their valuation. I don't know the exact number, but I read something like 75% lower than last year. So companies valuation, like you should always ask and do the research to know what is the valuation, but you don't always know exactly how much it's going to be in the future. So it's sort of a bet that you're making based on, other research and your gut feeling.
it's like counterintuitive, right? Also, people might say the exact opposite advice of what I'm mentioning, which is you want to join a company that's doing well and is worth a lot. So take that with a grain of salt. But generally speaking, I think it actually makes a really good case for earlier stage equity or pre-series A, because the likelihood of your shares to go up by a multiple that changes your life is higher than a company that has a multi-billion-dollar valuation that they have to grow into, that they might not be there yet. So I think valuation is a good question to suss out on your own and to make like a judgment call. Now, look, none of us are investors, none of us are doing this professionally, but based on what you've learned about the company in the interview process, do you think that valuation makes sense? And do you see a lot of potential and where the company is headed? And that's the advice that I generally give to candidates at the end of the day when they're looking at their equity, because 1%, or sorry, 1% is actually a great percentage. If you have 1%,
That's a
you should
lot.
definitely consider that. Yeah.
As a
But
founding engineer,
right,
head of engineering.
exactly. But if you're having 0.01%, 0.01% versus 0.02%, that's not going to be the life-changing amount difference that changes your life, right? In terms of salary, unless you join a Facebook or, like Jane, and join a WhatsApp, and then it makes a big difference. But for most of us, it's about, do we think that this is the right stock to bet on? And that's a whole can of worms we could go down. But
And
that's,
like to your point, even professional investors, they actually get to invest in hundreds of companies, and that's why they win big. But as an engineer, we can't work at hundreds of companies all at once. So the probability of us getting it right is pretty slim.
yeah, totally. I will say though, with equity, right, like 0.01 versus 0.02, does that really make a difference in your life? TBD. But equity is an area that you can negotiate more aggressively than
True.
base. Do you have advice for people about that?
It's really difficult to negotiate your compensation because the best way is to first go in and do a kick-ass job in your interview. Other than that, the best way is to have other offers, saying, I have three other offers. I've seen this a lot while I was at Facebook. If you have multiple offers from the FANGs, they'll likely try to compete each other. And oftentimes, like Google will give you an even higher offer once they know that you have an offer from Facebook, vice versa. So best way to get a good offer or negotiate your offer is to have other companies going for you.
So with equity, I actually recommend people take a kind of big swing in negotiations and ask for significantly more equity if they value it. If you don't value it, don't do it. It's a waste of everybody's time. But if you do value it, if you're senior enough in your career where you feel like you're making an important decision and you're making a trade-off versus a more stable company, you can ask for 2x, 4x the equity that you have. Or you can do, we did some really cool math with someone a couple years ago, and we said, what makes, the last company she worked at, she worked there for 7 years, and she said, I'm making a big life commitment to this from a personal financial standpoint. How can we set me up for the long term financially to just make sure the upside is worth my while? And we like doubled her equity using that. So if you are interested in equity, you can ask for more aggressively than you can ask for base, because base is a little bit more set or banded, whereas equity, you get a lot if you play it right.
That also depends on the company too, because some companies are a little bit more strapped with their equity. If they're already at Series C and they have too many investors and too many angels already and too many people on the leadership team, then they're a little bit strapped. But you're right, like on the earlier side, if they're pre-seed or Series A, they often do have a lot more room to play around with. So that is a good way to negotiate. Just ask for it.
And generally, I would say if a company is strapped on equity, that's exactly the company that you want to go get equity for. The ones that are just giving it away a lot, be a little bit more hesitant about what it's actually worth. But if a company is protecting their equity close to the chest, that is the company that you want to ask. And for context, right, they sell like 5% of the company to some investor all the time. And so I actually think that also, we've seen some companies be kind of aggressive with their equity packages. Like I remember Snapchat back in the day was giving like $1 million equity packages. So some companies are really aggressive with their equity.
Yeah.
And basically, because some companies are aggressive with their equity, it's worth a shot of asking other companies for aggressive equity and just seeing what they say.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the phase the startup is in. I think when Snapchat was giving away a lot of equity, they were in a aggressive growth mode where they were trying to attract a lot of talent because they were trying to grow, 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 grow. So if you want to join a company that's in a growth stage, that would be a good indicator. How much equity that you can negotiate. But sometimes maybe companies are not in a growth stage and that it would be a little bit tougher to negotiate for equity. And that's also a good indicator to see what type of phase a startup is in. And just because you're in a growth phase, it doesn't mean they're going to be successful and vice versa, but it's just a good indicator where they are. I feel like we covered a lot today. That was a lot of information from compensation, equity, negotiation, contract. I'm sure people still have a lot of questions. We can always do another video as a follow-up. I think I would love to hear from people. If you can comment, if you have additional questions, we would love to hear from you. Lexi and I have so much to share. I'm sure we can hop on another call and
We could go on for hours about this. So,
yeah.
and there's probably a lot of knowledge that people could just take in before jumping into their interview process and make a big
Yeah.
difference overall.
Yeah. Maybe we can do a YouTube live one day if people want it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much for having me.
This was fun. All right. Thanks, Lexi. Bye.
I'm like, I'm like, you can continue.